Welcome back, everybody, to Season 9.
Oh, yeah.
This season, we are diving deep into the world of the Syriac early church fathers.
That's right.
And these figures were really influential in shaping Christian thought. So how people understand theology, how people interpret the Bible, even how people live their lives.
Yeah.
And we're going to be taking a pretty serious look at their contributions and impact this season.
It is a fascinating period. You
Yeah.
know, you see this incredible, fusion of cultures and ideas. These figures were rooted in their Eastern heritage, but they were also engaging with Greek philosophy
Right.
and the broader Roman world.
And to guide us through all this,
Yeah.
we are tuning to the research of Andre Moubarak,
Oh, fantastic.
who is a teacher and a tour guide based in Jerusalem. And he's an Aramaic-speaking Christian who is so passionate about uncovering these Aramaic roots of the Christian faith.
Yeah, his insights are invaluable,
Yeah.
for understanding these early figures, especially their connection to the Syriac language and culture.
Absolutely. And you can find out more about Andre and his work at www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com.
Great website.
I highly recommend checking it out
Yeah.
if you want to delve even deeper into this topic. But for now,
Yeah.
let's dive into our first figure,
Okay.
Tatian the Assyrian.
All right.
He's a bit of an enigma.
Uh-huh.
He was brilliant, he was a theologian, he was a writer,
Yeah.
but he also really pushed the boundaries of what was considered Orthodox Christianity
Right.
back in the 2nd century.
Yeah.
What makes him so intriguing to you?
Well, I think Tatian embodies this tension, between preserving tradition and forging new paths.
Okay.
It's a tension that runs throughout early Christianity,
Mhm.
and it's very much alive in Tatian's story, deeply influenced by Greek philosophy.
Right.
But then he turns around and criticizes Greek culture quite harshly.
Wow.
He creates this groundbreaking harmony of the Gospels,
Yeah.
but his own theological views lead him away from the mainstream church.
Really?
It's fascinating.
It's a paradox.
It is a paradox, yeah.
So let's unpack that paradox a little bit.
Okay.
Starting with Tatian's background.
Okay.
He was born in Assyria, modern-day Iraq,
Right.
around 120 AD.
Okay.
Can you paint a picture of what his world would have been like growing up?
So imagine a region steeped in history. Ancient empires,
Right.
crossroads of cultures.
Right.
Tatian would have been exposed to a real mix of influences.
Yeah.
Assyrian traditions, Persian religion, Greek philosophy.
Wow.
This blend of cultures, I think, is really key to understanding his unique perspective.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about him navigating all these different
Yeah,
intellectual and spiritual currents.
absolutely.
So we know he was steeped in Greek learning,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually found himself drawn to the Hebrew scripture and converted to Christianity.
Right.
What do we know about that conversion experience?
Well, unfortunately, the sources don't give us a detailed account of, his conversion moment.
right.
But what's interesting is that even when he's immersed in this Greco-Roman world,
Yeah.
he never shies away from his Assyrian identity.
Interesting.
It was like
Yeah.
he seems to see it as a source of strength and a lens through which he viewed his new faith.
Wow. So he carries this Assyrian identity with him
He does, yeah.
as he journeys to Rome and becomes a student of Justin Martyr,
Yes.
one of the most important
One of the most important.
early Christian thinkers.
Absolutely.
What was it about Justin Martyr that drew Tatian to him?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, Justin Martyr was known for his philosophical approach to Christianity.
Okay.
He was really trying to bridge the gap between Greek thought and Christian belief,
Right.
which probably resonated with Tatian given his own background.
Yeah.
Justin saw the seeds of the logos, the divine word, present in Greek philosophy,
Right.
foreshadowing the coming of Christ.
Okay.
And we can see this influence, I think, in some of Tatian's early writings, where he tries to reconcile faith and reason.
Really interesting. So, but their paths diverge
They do.
after Justin's martyrdom,
Right.
and Tatian's views take a sharp turn
Yeah,
toward asceticism.
that's right.
What exactly does that mean
Yeah, what does that mean?
in this context, and what led him down this path?
Well, asceticism for Tatian meant rejecting worldly pleasures and embracing a life of strict self-discipline.
Okay.
He believed that the material world was corrupted
Mm-hmm.
because of Adam's fall. And so to achieve spiritual purity, you had to separate yourself from the trappings of this world.
So that's where the Encratites come in.
That's right.
So were the Encratites like an early Christian monastic movement?
It's a good question. They weren't quite monastic in the sense of withdrawing to isolated communities,
Okay.
but they did embrace a very rigorous lifestyle.
Okay.
They rejected marriage, seeing it as a concession to the flesh.
Wow.
They abstained from meat
Yeah.
and even refused to use wine in the Eucharist, substituting it with water.
Wow, that's a radical
Departure
It is.
from mainstream Christian practices.
Yeah, they were really living on the edge of what was considered acceptable
Yeah,
at the time.
at the time.
Absolutely. And this radicalism stems from Tatian's deep-seated belief in the inherent corruption of the material world.
Right.
For him, true spirituality meant transcending the physical realm, and he wasn't afraid to push the boundaries to achieve that goal.
It's this intensity that makes him such a compelling figure.
Oh,
A
absolutely.
man of extremes,
He was.
both in his intellect and his faith.
That's right. A man of extremes. Yeah.
Yeah,
A fascinating figure.
fascinating figure.
Very much so.
All right, so
Shall we move on?
let's move on to
Yeah, to his most famous work.
his most famous work.
Yeah, the Diatessaron.
Yes, the Diatessaron.
Right.
That's coming up next.
Great. Stay with us.
It really is. You mentioned earlier that Tatian created like a harmony of the Gospels.
Yeah.
This is where we get to his most famous work. The Diatessaron.
Yes, the Diatessaron, this is something that's always fascinated me.
Right.
He essentially takes the four Gospels,
Yeah.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John,
Right.
and weaves them together
Yeah.
into a single unified narrative of Jesus' life.
That's right.
And, for someone today, it might sound strange.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, the idea of a fixed biblical canon wasn't as rigid back then.
Exactly. The boundaries of what was considered scripture were still being formed.
Right?
And Tatian saw these four Gospels as inspired accounts of Jesus's life, and he wanted to present them as a cohesive whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Imagine for early Christians who might only have access to fragments of Scripture, having this single flowing narrative of Jesus' teachings, miracles, and passion.
Right. It must have been incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me think about the different ways we encounter the story of Jesus today.
Yeah.
Through the four separate Gospels, through film adaptations,
Right.
through art. Each medium shapes our understanding.
Absolutely. So did the Diatessaron have any lasting impact?
Oh, absolutely huge impact.
Really?
The Diatessaron became the standard gospel text for Syriac-speaking Christians.
Wow.
For centuries.
Right.
It shaped how generations understood the life of Christ.
That's incredible.
Think about that. The
Yeah.
impact of having this single harmonized narrative guiding your understanding of Jesus's teachings and his actions.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is.
We often take for granted having the four Gospels as separate texts,
Yeah.
but to think of them as initially being woven together into this unified story,
Yeah.
it really highlights the fluidity of early Christianity.
Yeah, for sure.
But I imagine Tatian's strict views on asceticism and his other theological ideas
Yeah.
caused some friction.
They did, especially with the growing institutional church.
Right.
His insistence on the corruption of the material world really clashed with the idea of creation's inherent goodness,
Okay.
which is a cornerstone of mainstream Christian theology.
How could God, who is good, create something inherently evil?
That's the question, yeah.
So Tatian's views on creation were causing a rift.
They were, and then there's the issue of Gnosticism.
Okay.
Tatian entertained ideas about intermediary beings called eons being involved in creation.
Okay.
Now, to understand this,
Yeah.
you need a little bit of background on Gnosticism.
Okay.
Gnostics, they believed that the material world was created by a flawed lesser deity,
Right.
not the true God.
Okay.
And so they sought secret knowledge gnosis
Okay.
to escape this flawed material realm.
I see.
So how do Tatian's ideas about eons
Right.
connect to Gnosticism?
Mhm.
Well, his inclusion of these eons in his cosmology
Yeah.
raised red flags for some.
Right.
Did he believe these beings were part of a flawed creation separate from the true God?
Okay.
Was he leaning towards Gnostic ideas?
Yeah.
These questions led to accusations of heresy.
Wow.
It was a complex theological landscape,
Sure.
and Tatian was navigating some very controversial territory.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, how he never fully abandoned his engagement with Greek culture.
Right.
I'm thinking of his Oratio et Graecos, his critique of Greek civilization.
Yes.
It's almost like he was wrestling with his own intellectual heritage.
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Oratio is fascinating.
Yeah.
He criticizes everything, Greek myths, philosophy, art, even their political systems.
Wow.
He argues that they're morally corrupt and intellectually inferior to the wisdom found in the Hebrew scriptures.
He really didn't hold back.
No, he didn't.
Was there anything he admired about Greek culture?
He did acknowledge the Greeks' contributions to logic and reason,
Okay.
but overall, he saw their culture as a distraction from true spiritual enlightenment.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he even claimed that Greek philosophers had plagiarized ideas from the Hebrew prophets.
Wow.
It's almost like a proto-cultural war happening in the 2nd century.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what his audience thought of all this.
Yeah.
Were his fellow Christians receptive to this harsh critique of Greek culture?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But his views likely resonated with some who felt that Christianity needed to distance itself from pagan influences.
Right.
Remember, this is a time when Christians are still a minority, often persecuted.
Yeah.
There was a desire to define a distinct Christian identity,
Right.
separate from the dominant culture.
So Tatian's strong stance against Greek culture might have appealed to some. His radical asceticism and his unorthodox views ultimately led to his condemnation by many in the Western Church.
That's right. He was labeled a heretic by some, and his writings were often viewed with suspicion.
But it's important to remember this was a time of intense theological debate.
Yes.
And diverse interpretations of Christianity.
Absolutely.
It reminds you that the early church wasn't this monolithic, unified entity.
Right.
There was a lot of fluidity and disagreement.
Yeah.
Different groups were trying to figure out what it meant to be a Christian in this new evolving context.
In this new world.
So Tatian's story embodies that struggle. He was trying to reconcile his own complex background with his passionate embrace of Christianity.
Yes.
And he wasn't afraid to challenge the norms of his time.
He was a bold thinker.
So how do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory aspects of Tatian?
Right.
The brilliance,
Yeah.
the radicalism, the eventual condemnation.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, what is his legacy, and does he still have something to teach us today?
That's a great question. It's like his legacy is kind of a blend of light and shadow.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he gives us the Diatessaron,
Right.
this groundbreaking work that really shaped how early Christians, especially in that Syriac-speaking world, understood the gospel.
Right.
But on the other hand, his more extreme views kind of lead him away from the mainstream church.
Yeah, and that's what makes studying these figures so fascinating.
It is.
They challenge us to think critically about the evolution of Christian thought.
Yeah.
They remind us that there wasn't this, single straight path.
Right.
From the early church to the present day. There were detours, there were disagreements, and there were figures like Tatian who just pushed the boundaries.
That's right.
So what can we, as modern-day readers, learn from a figure like Tatian?
Yeah.
His ideas might seem strange
Mm-hmm.
or even heretical to us now,
Right.
but he was grappling with genuine questions about faith,
Yeah.
about culture, about how to live a truly Christian life
Yeah.
in a complex world.
Absolutely. He reminds us that the search for spiritual truth is often messy and it doesn't always fit neatly into predefined boxes.
Right.
He forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own assumptions and our biases.
Like, how do we approach early Christian writings that challenge our modern understanding of orthodoxy?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Do we dismiss them outright, or do we try to understand them within their historical context?
It's a humbling exercise, isn't it?
It's humbling to realize that our own perspective
Yeah.
is shaped by our own time and place, just as Tatian's was.
Exactly. And maybe that's one of the most valuable lessons we can take away from Tatian's story.
What's that?
The importance of humility, intellectual curiosity, and a willingness to engage with different perspectives,
Yeah.
even those that might seem strange or challenging to us.
Well said. It's a good reminder for all of us,
Yeah.
especially as we continue our journey
Yeah.
through the world of the Syriac Church Fathers this season.
This season,
Don't forget to check out the work of Andre Moubarak,
great resource.
whose research has been so insightful for this deep dive. You can find him at www.twinsbiblicalacademy.com. Until next time, keep diving deep and remember to approach these complex historical figures with a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness.